Her backstory, she's a doctor of American Studies and the former chair of the Smithsonian's Space History Department. And now Valerie Neal has added a third book to her collected works. It tracks the long and storied past of NASA's women astronauts. Joining us now is Dr. Neal. She will be at the Museum of Flight this weekend to talk more about her new book. It's called On a Mission. But first, she's offering us a little bit of a sneak peek. Welcome to the show, Doctor. Nice to have you.
Good morning. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, after writing books about the space shuttle program and the discovery, why this book? Why now?
Well, we're at a point where we've had women astronauts for 45 years, and hardly anybody knows about them. People can remember Sally Ride, but beyond that, they really can't name any other women astronauts. And so I thought it was time to try to get all of the women astronauts between the covers of one book, treat them all as a group and treat them individually, and basically just get them on the record so we don't forget about them.
Great idea. On a Mission, I understand, documents the histories of all 61 of NASA's women astronauts. When writing about each of these stories, which one sort of stuck out the most to you?
I think the ones that touched me the most were the ones of the women who had a hard road to get to be an astronaut. They applied multiple times before they were finally accepted, and then they were stellar. And it just struck me that their talent was overlooked early on, in part because people were not used to seeing women in science and engineering. And I think they were underestimated. And one of the most outstanding of the women astronauts is Peggy Whitson, who has the longest time in space for an American woman astronaut. She applied 5 times before she was accepted, and she ended up being, at the top of the list. So those stories I found especially inspirational. The perseverance, despite obstacles that they encountered along the way.
Perseverance and certainly persistence paid off in that particular case.
Yes.
I know that some of the astronauts have since passed, of course, but how many of these women were you actually able to personally speak with, and which ones do you wish you could have had the opportunity to talk to?
I was able to speak with about 30 of the former astronauts. 4 had died, and so I had not had an opportunity to talk with them. NASA did not grant me permission to talk to the women who are currently on active status. So there's another 30 or so that I was not allowed to interview. But I think the ones that I did speak to certainly gave me a lot of insight into the first 2 generations of women astronauts. The thing I regret is I don't have those firsthand accounts for the younger, newer astronauts, and they had a much different experience. By the time they came along, joining the astronaut corps in this century, most of the barriers were down, and they entered with 10-year careers behind them already in the military or in industry. And so they didn't really have to prove anything to anybody. They had earned their way in, and I would have loved to have talked to them to hear how their experiences differed from those of the women who were selected in the 1978 class and 1980s and 90s.
Yeah, just to see how the opportunities and how the industry has changed overall. Anything surprise you in having those conversations with the 30 that you did talk to?
Well, one thing that surprised me was how frank they were, very candid. They were very encouraging about this book. They were willing to answer any question that I asked. A few things they told me very frankly, and they would have preferred not to have their exact words associated with them, but they were giving me really an insider's view into some of the things that went on in the astronaut corps. And particularly, there was a lot of strong feeling among some of the women astronauts about the lack of a spacesuit that was small enough for the smallest of them. And so they were very candid about that, but encouraged me to write about it diplomatically.
I've heard some concerns about that before, and you know, hopefully, I think a lot of people are thinking that NASA should be listening when thinking about that. I understand, Valerie, that much of your past work focuses on the future of space flight. Do you think that women attempting to break into the field now face some of the same issues that they did in the past, based off of what your research has shown you and some of those conversations that you had with some of these female astronauts?
I don't think so. I think now any woman who wants to be an astronaut, who has the credentials and who has the persistence, has a very good chance of making it. I think women are fully accepted within the NASA astronaut corps. They have proven they can do every job that an astronaut does, including commanding missions and carrying out very difficult spacewalks. And I think the fact that the current astronaut corps is almost 50% women now, and these are the astronauts who will be going to the moon, is a testament to the fact that women have really earned their place in space, and there isn't an obstacle to them anymore.
On a Mission is the name of the book. Valerie, thanks so much for joining us this morning. It's a fascinating line of work, and certainly a noble one as well. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you, and I look forward to being at the museum on Saturday.
We look forward to having you here in Western Washington as well. Thank you.